This week on Inside the Headset, we are featuring Nick Davis, the head coach at Ottawa University. Coach Davis reflects on his career progression, growth as a coach, and experience with the AFCA 35 under 35. If you like this podcast, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch new episodes each week. Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Davis.
Coach Nick Davis, how you doing?
Not too bad. It's a great day.
Well, happy to see you as always, man. I know I've appreciated our relationship as it's grown over the years. Just I think I met you probably on the tail end of my coaching, my active coaching, and got to know you more and more through the AFCA, through your willingness and readiness to always educate coaches through the Spread Defense Twitter account, and then had you on the podcast before. You've been part of 35 and 35, spoke for us several times at the AFCA convention. You're just a great friend of the AFCA, so I appreciate you for that. But I'm ready to dive in here with you, man, because just some of our pre-game podcast stuff, man. You're just really interesting when it comes to this profession. So I want to ask you the question: when did you decide? At what point did you say, man, I want to be a part of this profession? I want to be a ball coach?
Yeah, my high school coach, Brian Halsey, had a huge influence on me. I knew I wanted to coach. Being a high school football player, I wasn't sure exactly. Initially, I thought maybe a high school football coach. That's all I knew. I went to Monmouth College and had an amazing experience with Steve Bell, my head coach there. And I kind of quickly realized after taking a few classes and having to go in and oversee some high school and middle school PE classes with kids that didn't necessarily actually want to participate in class that I really wanted to get into college football. Lyle Pierce was my defensive line coach and kind of a mentor for me there at Monmouth, and he gave me an amazing experience, and I wanted to be able to give that to a bunch of young men. And so I did that in 2000, 2009 had, that kind of moment, and I knew I was going to be a college football coach kind of ever since.
Yeah, so you make your mind up that you want to do that. And this is something that anybody listens to the podcast frequently hears me say almost every podcast is like, the first gig is the hardest one to get. And I'm pretty sure your first gig was a D-line assistant, right, at your alma mater.
Yep.
So just real quick, what was that process like? Just, hey, Coach, man, I want to get into this thing. And, how did you approach that to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, for any, going to be senior or junior that's actually listening to the podcast that wants to break into the business, I think I waited a little bit later to kind of figure out. Like, I always knew I wanted to coach, and then senior year came, and I was like, hey, Coach Bell, who do you know? And our offense and our defense coordinator, our special teams coordinator at the time, Chad Braun and Coach Ragone, and they're like, we've been here at Monmouth for 12 years, and no one's left on staff, and we don't go to the conventions anymore because we're kind of set here at Monmouth. And I was like, dang. They're like, we're willing to call anyone or anything, but we don't really have connections anymore just because we've been around each other for the last 12 years, and it's only been about Monmouth College football, which is a great thing for that program, but it was a bad thing for me at the time. So begged them to be a unpaid D-line coach for that spring. I did an unpaid internship at Western Illinois University. A lot of people within or my major, you had to do an unpaid internship. A lot of kids did just easy things. I drove 35 minutes away to do strength and conditioning, and that led to an unpaid internship at the University of Michigan, where I slept on a floor and ate ramen noodles for a whole entire summer. So that was another big thing, because a lot of people said, hey, if you're willing to work for free or no money, and people out there are willing to give you an opportunity. So Kent Kessinger, the head coach at Ottawa, he'd been the head coach here for 19 years until he retired 2 years ago, called me up and asked me if I'd like to come out to Ottawa. And I said I'd never been to Canada before, and he said it was out in the middle of Kansas. So that was an awesome opportunity. And we go back and I asked him, and he said, I was willing, I love Division III guys because they love football. They paid to go to school, and the fact that you really paid to go work for free, he's like, I knew the work, integrity and the work ethic that you had, without even having to kind of interview you.
Yeah. Well, so how did you come on his radar? Like, how was he able to, figure out who you were? Did you send something in to him or word of mouth?
Yeah, AFCA job board. At that point I didn't know about Football Scoop, so I think there was AFCA job board, there was Division III job board, there was an NAIA job board. So that's how I knew. I get to Ottawa and I find out about this thing called footballscoop.com, and I'm like, oh man, I really messed up because there could have been a thousand opportunities, but heck, you apply for 100 places and you hear back from 3 coaches, and you got to do really well. And just with GAs in general, like you go to interview them, and most of them have never coached before, and you get off the phone, you're like, that guy's not a very good coach. Well, you're taking a chance on a lot of these guys of
Absolutely.
Can they work hard, and can I teach them to be a great coach?
No, there's no doubt about it. Now, just in that brief description right there, you mentioned spring D-line assistant in Monmouth. You're driving to Western Illinois. You're sleeping on the floor in Michigan, and then you kind of break through with the graduate assistant job there in Ottawa. Just really quick, more just from memory. What were those 2 or 3 years like? Where it's just a grind, man. It's not about the paycheck. It's about learning. You're in strength and conditioning. I'm only assuming you probably didn't know much other than what you taught. What you were taught as a player. What was that learning process like? What was that grind like? And what has that meant to you long term in your career?
Yeah, it was just taking a lot in and being able to be a sponge. If you can learn something about strength and conditioning at Western Illinois, and you can take that and learn. I wasn't teaching things at the University of Michigan, but being able to help them in their process, be able to do that. And so I saw athletes at the FCS level. I saw athletes at the Division I level and the Big Ten. I go on to get a GA job where I'm around NAIA athletes. At Monmouth, I'd been around Division III athletes. So really early in my career, I'd been around the best athletes in the country, and I've been around, the least talented college football players, per se in the country. So I was able to, I think, judge talent pretty good.
Yeah. And then at your stint at Ottawa the first time, you, I believe, coached DBs and linebackers, which you didn't play that in college, right?
Yeah, I was a D lineman.
You were a D lineman. So, right. I mean, it's like 4 years, you're just straight up out of your comfort zone. You're in strength and conditioning. You're learning all this kind of stuff. You're supposed to be running forward. You got guys backpedaling and all. You know what I'm saying? You're just, like you said, been a sponge. How I'm assuming, and I could be wrong here, please correct me. I'm assuming you had some of those rooms on your own. I spent some time doing small college football, so oftentimes the GA does have their own room. How did you prepare yourself to go stand in front of guys and teach them how to be, better than what they are when they show up? How did you prepare yourself to be a great coach?
Yeah, Josh Omoka, who was the D coordinator, at Ottawa at the time. He's kind of one of the biggest mentors in my career on the defensive side of the game. He got there, and I'm thinking, I'm going to coach D-line. And, we never talked about what I was coaching. He said, you're going to coach the defensive backs with me. I'll coach the safeties. You'll take the corners. And he's like, you're going to be better for this when you're done. And then that's the next year. I got down and coached. I showed him that I was able to do it. He gave me the linebackers, and our D-line coach was actually the golf coach at the school. You're in these D3 NAIA schools, and everybody's got a lot of hats.
Yeah.
So for the spring, I would coach the D-line. So I really kind of got an opportunity to coach really all 3 defensive positions at Ottawa and learn a lot, and kind of set me up when I'm applying after you graduate with your master's degree to apply to 500 different schools across the country to get another opportunity.
Oh, well, you've obviously done well with your career. Anybody that's watched over the years and anybody listens to the podcast, I'm going to ask you to be a little vulnerable here because I know it's easy, especially in your role. We always highlight all the great stuff. Well, what was something that early on you were like, man, I just wasn't very good at that, or this was a challenge for me. It just took you some time to get better. I can think of 100 things when I was a young coach doing my first couple jobs, and I look back on it now, I'm like, man, I can't believe I was doing that. But did you have any of those moments where it took a little maybe extra studying to understand defensive back play or anything like that?
I think the biggest thing is recruiting. I was kind of naturally in my life is a shy person, and a lot of people wouldn't know that because I've done a lot for spread defense and I've done a lot of podcasts. Like, I kind of like to stay to my kind of core group of friends and really didn't venture outside of that. But recruiting in this game of football has really kind of broadened my horizon, and I realized that, you got to be able to have some communication skills to recruit athletes from different parts of the country. I go to Rose-Hulman, and our school costs $70,000 a year, and I got to be able to recruit kids from across the country that are only engineers, and those are different conversations across the world. So that was huge for me, is being able to become a better communicator, understanding, different families' dynamics and situations, and that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned this while you're talking about some other stuff, is just wearing different hats. What is some of the stuff that kind of comes along with those early jobs that helped you be a great coach now, help you probably delegate some of these duties as you're at a smaller school right now, but what are some of those hats you wore as a young coach that you look back and say, man, that video coordinator gig, it sucked at the time, but that was a good experience? What were some of those things?
Yeah, so obviously the strength internships helped me get my first GA job at Ottawa. I came in and I was the strength, at the time we didn't have a full-time strength department. I was our strength coach as a 22-year-old graduate assistant for our whole entire football program, because our head coach, he had a background, and our D coordinator had a background, but it was really easy for a 22-year-old that just got done with this experience to go run with that. So that experience as an intern led to me getting this job at Ottawa. And then I go to Rose, and I become a special teams coordinator and a video coordinator, which, being the special teams coordinator, led to the belief that our head coach, Jeff Sokol, thought I could be the defensive coordinator. And once you're in that role, and Coach Sokol saw the way we recruited, our recruiting coordinator left, hey, you take care of recruiting coordinating. So really in the business, I've done really every little small task, which now I go back to Ottawa to be the defensive coordinator, and our head coach retires, and I'm sitting in front of, administration. I've been a recruiting coordinator. I've been a strength coordinator. I've been a special teams coordinator. I've been a defensive coordinator. I've coached offense and been the JV offensive coordinator. I've really done every aspect of football, and I'm sitting in this interview, and they're asking me all these questions. And I fully believe, because of my experiences, that's what allowed me to get this job as the head coach. Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned Rose-Hulman. It's got to be a special place to you, almost a decade there. I would imagine, you just kind of ran through some of the roles. You just skimmed the surface on all the different stuff that you did there. School cost $70,000 to get in, probably more at this point in time. And mechanical engineering, really like the highlight of that school. Super unique, super special place. Kind of reflecting on that almost a decade there. Where did you grow the most, and what prepared you the most from that stint to be a head ball coach?
Yeah, it was really Jeff Sokol, our head coach. He gave us areas, and he said, "You go be the head coach of this area." So when I was the recruiting coordinator, obviously he had final say, but I felt like a head coach. And when I was the defensive coordinator, I felt like I was the defensive head coach of the team. And when I did video, like, it was, "Hey, Nick, where do you need us on the practice field to get this shot?" And where I think I grew the most, and where I think a lot of these young coaches, a lot of times Coach Sokol never had to come to me and say, "Hey, I want you to do this." It was me finding out a problem before he knew, and I went and fixed and solved the solution and said, "Hey, you didn't even know this was a problem, but this is what I did, and this is how we accomplished it." So, you fail a lot in football, and, if you just win national championships and then you go to another school, it's not going to be as easy as what it was at Georgia, with those great players and a phenomenal staff. So I learned a lot by failing.
Yeah. And, what would you say to a young coach, trying to break into the business, and he maybe has some opportunities to GA or take a job at, off the field role at a major university, or maybe have a more significant role at a smaller university? Like, what is that message in terms of, especially when you look back on your career and see how special been at some of these smaller schools has been? What would be your message about taking those opportunities at those small schools to get a lot more experience?
Yeah, I think it's huge. Is the big thing to me is don't necessarily chase the logo. I think you want to chase a head coach who's going to treat you right.
Yeah.
Kent Kessinger at Ottawa treated me right. Mike Barwis at the University of Michigan treated me right. Jeff Sokol at Ottawa, Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology treated me right. So I think that's helped me grow. If I just would have win, that's a good logo. They're Division I, but their head coach isn't gonna, help you. I don't think that's great. Like I've heard from, whether it's right or wrong, one of our coaches in the past has said, yeah, my former head coach only allowed me to apply to 3 jobs and he'd only give me 3 references. So if I didn't get those 3 jobs, I was kind of done with the head coach being a reference, So I think that's important, because you need to have a great support staff, whether it's the head coach or the assistant coaches around you, to help you get where you want to go. If you're just I want to go to D1 and that staff's not supportive of you, I don't know if your career is going to go where you think it's going to go.
No, that's some great advice there, Coach. So after the successful period at Rose-Hulman, you get a call for the DC role at Ottawa, which you kind of cut your teeth there early on. What led you back? What made you say, man, you know what, I'm going to take this? Because once again, I met you for the first time at Rose-Hulman. I mean, you were just, to me, when I heard Rose-Hulman, like when I saw that pop up, it was Nick Davis. Like that's kind of how I identified it, even to this point right now. So had to be a tough decision. But what made you decide to go back?
Yeah, I mean, I think when your mentor calls you and says, hey, we got a spot for you and we'd love to get you back. And we preach family here, and it's huge, and it's, not just us saying it. So bringing my wife out here to Kansas and showing her around, I think she felt that. And just like on the wall behind me, these are all the All-Americans we've had in the Kent Kessinger era. This is 19 years. Like, all these guys are family, whether I coach these guys or not. Like, it's huge. So getting back on campus, and I knew, at some point, Coach Kessinger told me he was going to retire. I didn't know it was going to be November after I show up in August, but he said he didn't have the passion to coach anymore, and he wanted to enjoy the rest of his life, have an RV, spend time with his wife and kids. So I kind of took a leap of faith to come here, and I said, if I work my butt off, it might work out. And ultimately, if it didn't work out, if he retired and I wouldn't have been the head coach, then, hey, I was around a great experience and a great opportunity. So that was huge for me, in this profession, to only have worked at 2 schools, really, Rose-Hulman and Ottawa. I've been super blessed to be around a supporting family.
Yeah, I think oftentimes as I look at a lot of resumes for like 35, 135 and stuff, I think when I look down and I see a guy that spent, majority of his career, especially, the longer they've been in it, at 1 to 2, even sometimes 3 spots, it really says a lot. Not necessarily always about that person, but it says a lot about the culture maybe on that staff, because, really good head coaches and really good, when I say good programs, I'm not talking about the win-loss column. I'm just talking about good programs where you have reasonable hours, you have great relationships on the staff. Man, sometimes it's hard to leave those jobs, even for better ones. And a lot of times that's a testament to what type of head coach is at that place, man. So I appreciate you, talking about Kessinger and, head coach of Rose-Hulman, because, I love seeing guys do things. I don't want to say the right way, because there's different ways to skin a cat now, but doing things in a way where coaches don't want to leave. I think that's super special. Now, You get there in August or September. Well, I guess it would have been August, right? You get there in August.
Yeah, July 4th, I rolled into town.
July 4th. Okay, so you get there in July 4th. It's a whirlwind. I can only imagine trying to just get the defense in place and figure everything out, get the lay of the land. You roll through a season. Coach Kessinger decides he's done. As that job opens. What was your expectations, and how did you prepare yourself for that job interview to see if you could be the next ball coach there?
Yeah, really, you prepare by your whole career, which you've done. Another mentor of mine, Brian White, he's at Delaware State right now. He had a number of head coaching opportunities, created a head coaching manual. He gave that to me, and that was something that I had worked on for a number of years. And it's stuff that I've given to young coaches as they said, hey, I got this head coaching opportunity. And whether you give it to the president or the athletic director, just you working on that document shows that you've kind of started to figure out, hey, if a kid gets in trouble, how am I going to punish him? How am I going to fundraise? How am I going to deal with donors? How are we going to start to do that? But that's stuff that I had worked on, and kind of when I got that manual in 2000, I think 17 or 18, I read through it. Those are things that I had been thinking about until 2021 when I would have an opportunity. And so that's kind of what I had done. And really the big thing was, some of these young coaches do a great job of where you're at. You never know that in 12 years you may be back at that school and that head coach may retire and administration remembered what you did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
If I was a jackwagon 10 years ago as a GA here at Ottawa, there'd be no way that I'd be the head coach right now.
Yeah.
So that stuff matters, that they were excited when I came back, and, they remembered me as probably a better coach than what I actually was. And that's what you want people to remember you as is, oh, this was the GA, the first GA in program history. And he did a phenomenal job, and he's gone off and made us proud, and now he's coming back. So that would be the biggest advice is, whether you're going to be an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, start preparing for that role. Don't wait until that interview.
So they named you the head ball coach, and this is going to be a tough question here. Now I've asked this before to guys that take over a program where you kind of had a historic figure there, someone that had some longevity there, especially unique when you had actually coached for that coach. I know it wasn't that long in the grand scheme of things. It was about 2.5 years out of his 19-year stint. But how do you put that line of delineation as like, hey, Coach Kessinger had a great deal here. He's a part of who I am, but this is the Nick Davis era, and not, I don't want to make it sound like, like you're, some big tyrant or something like that, but just putting your own mark on that program. What was that, those first couple of weeks like, just defining what your culture is?
Yeah, what I wanted to do was I met with every single player and I asked them, what did we do best?
Okay.
And everyone said family atmosphere. So I said, I can't start this program with why I came back. And if these kids are all saying it, like, I got to do that. And my goal is to, not trying to be cocky, but I want to do it better than Coach Kessinger for Coach
Absolutely.
Kessinger.
Right.
I want to raise the bar for him. And then I asked what we could do, what we're best at. What could we do a better job at? And it was accountability of things. And we're coming off of COVID and whether a kid's sick or not sick and, those sort of things. It's accountability from the top down, from the players to the coaches. And then I asked what was lacking. And because we were a little down in a trajectory of where we were at, we were, when I was around the program as a graduate assistant, there were 6 straight years we went to the playoffs and won 4 conference championships. And what we lacked was the mindset, is what the kids said. So kind of how we came together with our culture was family, accountability, and mindset. What Coach K did best, what we needed to improve on, and what we felt was lacking from, what, good or bad, from what Coach Kessinger had done. So focus, and we're really trying to focus on all 3 areas. Strengthen our best thing, all right? Get better at what our kids thought was a huge issue, I think, in winning football games, and it's important to listen to them. And then, hey, what is the structure we think we lack? So it wasn't family accountability and mindset, wasn't me, what I had on my head coaching manual on the first page. It was these kids determined what that focus was.
Absolutely. That's awesome you said that. I mean, not always are they 100% right, but when you go and ask 10 of them, it becomes more right. When you ask 20 of them and you go and ask the whole team, clearly you find some reality there. So that's great that you kind of went to the source to develop, what direction you guys were going. Now, I know you're always willing to pour information, so like I'm getting nerded out a little bit on Prime and some of this stuff. When you get a head coaching job, especially in the situation that you kind of got it, I'm sure there were other guys on the staff that might have been around, whether it was when you were DC or just guys that had longevity. How do you structure your staff? How do you decide to retain or all that kind of stuff? Those tough decisions. What was some of your thought process as you went through that early phase?
Yeah, our offensive coordinator was an alum, Julian Mendez, and our special teams coordinator at the time, Wes Coombe, were alums. And they were guys that I coached Wes, and I worked with Julian here as graduate assistants. So Coach K had built this family of coaches that had these connections to school. And was Julian probably disappointed that he wasn't the head coach? I'm sure he was, man. And I had conversations of, this isn't my program, this is our program, we're going to do it together. And the way life works out, Wes ends up with a great opportunity at a Division II school. 5 months later, Julian's wife actually takes a head softball job down there in Texas at UTPB, and he moves down there. And heck, he just got named the head coach at an NAIA school, William Woods, about 2.5 hours away from here. So, I'm super excited about his opportunities. So that was the big thing for me is I'm going to, keep this group together. And then they all went off and ended up with amazing opportunities. And then it allowed me to, hire what I feel is amazing football coaches.
And where did you look? Did you look for that alum to kind of continue that family culture, or did you look into your personal network, guys that you have identified as great coaches?
Yeah, our first hire was Tyler Hennis. He's actually the offensive coordinator now at Reinhardt. But he had a connection with Julian, and it was very important for me as a first-time head coach that Julian felt comfortable with another guy to come in and create a new offense together. And obviously, Julian's wife gets the opportunity, and Tyler kind of gets thrust into the OC role. And then on the defensive side, once Wes left, we brought in Dante Marti, who has that connection of the spread defense. We had been in the same clinics, around the same circles. Brian Vaughn, who I actually worked with at Rose-Hulman, and him were good buddies. I had made connections with Kyle Kogan, who's at Benedictine, who's Dante's best friend. So that was an easy process. And then, both of them went on and got an amazing opportunity. Dante's at Oregon, and Tyler's the offensive coordinator at Reinhardt, who was a playoff team in the NAIA last year, and was able to bring back in this round Clarence Anderson, who's one of the best players in school history, 16 NFL teams. I actually coached him, so I know what I'm getting. And then Blake Mudd, who's an alum, graduate assistant, reminds me a lot of myself. Went to Northern Illinois. He coached high school. Unfortunately, he was at presentation when their school closed down as the defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. So was able to take care of two alums and elevate them to positions kind of that they've never had. And whether you're an alum or you're my connection, I want hardworking guys. And what I've found with the alums is there's more skin in the game.
Absolutely.
They really want to make sure Ottawa is successful.
That's awesome, Coach. Well, yeah, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, man, and we are getting close to running out of time. So I'm gonna throw two questions at you here before I ask about 35 under 35. Turnover. Oftentimes, you get high quality coaches at these type of places. And, you get younger coaches, guys are still early in their career, taking different opportunities. How do you handle that turnover? You just mentioned about 6 coaches right there that you kind of had to will and deal over the years. I guess not necessarily manage it, but, how do you make sure that deck is always ready, for the next set of hires, or how are you identifying guys that, that would be good fits down the road?
Yeah, one thing that I do is with every job search, I want to hire the best coach. So I've coached offense in the falls, and when we've lost people. I've been our defensive coordinator in the spring, which, until recently had kind of been my super passion. But like within those searches, like Blake was an alum who had applied for a job in the past, and Clarence was an alum who had applied for jobs in the past. So it's getting those connections. Like it's hard for me, and this may be a lot of people, but I just get a blank resume and I don't know who you are and you've never reached out to me in the past. That's hard. But if you're consistently have tried to reach out to me or clinic with me, and do it in the general of learning, not, hey, I'm only talking to you because I want a job here in a year.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. I think that's huge. So that's what we kind of always do is look for the best coach. And sometimes that may not be the best X and O's coach. That may be the best coach at Ottawa, which includes recruiting, alumni reactions. Maybe you got to teach a class. Like it's the best fit for us. And then as the head coach, man, I have to be able to adapt. I've coached running backs and tight ends and offensive line and D-line here and linebackers and defensive backs. And in 3 years, I got to put myself, which helps us put ourselves in the best situation to be successful. And if we're going to hire a GA and they have no idea about that position, I'll go coach it and let them feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach, that's awesome. And that, kind of in the whole story of everything as we coming close to a close, those experiences have just kind of been able to be ready to do whatever is needed to be done. It still exists even as the head ball coach there, just hopping in all those different rooms and, making sure you can put the best coaches on their staff and you be flexible for that.
Yeah, I just painted our office, the whole complex, and I didn't even allow any of the young coaches to help me because I'm like, hey, at the end of the day, like, you guys work. Like, I'll do this. I want to paint this office because I want it to be more presentable to our players and recruits, and I want it to be a nicer spot for you guys. Don't tell my facilities, Mario, that I painted it, but got it done, and I'll never ask our coaches or players to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do.
Coach, I appreciate that, and I hope those young coaches that work for you, I hope they do too. You said a lot of great stuff here today. I'm going to ask you one tough question here before we get off. I know sometimes it's hard to look back and evaluate yourself sometimes, especially when the closer it is to now, some of your recent actions. But as a first year or early in your career as a head coach, what was one of those things that was like, man, you know what? I was prepared. I've been preparing for this for a long time. I was not prepared for that. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't do a good job with that. Well, what were one of those things that you kind of look back and say, I had to make a big adjustment on this?
Yeah, I think everyone talks about the culture, but that is real. And I think the one kind of misstep is I took over as the head coach and our culture was pretty good in that first spring as the head coach. And I thought, going into the fall, that's just going to roll over.
Yeah.
Well, we added 50 new people to the organization and, everything's great in the spring when you're not winning and losing. You start to, our expectations last season that we were going to win a lot of football games. And when that didn't happen in week 1 and 2, you really see the true character of some people. And I just have to always remind myself that 50% of that team in year 1 came for what we were trying to accomplish. 50% of that team came to play for Coach Kessinger, which is fine. Now we're in that 75% of this team has came for what we're trying to accomplish. And I still have 25% that I'm working my hardest to make sure that they buy in. And if they don't, it's fine. They didn't come for Nick Davis and Clarence Anderson and Blake Mudd. They came to play for Coach Kessinger. All right. All I hope is that they're respectful and they work hard. And what we found is, those guys that have stuck around, they bought it.
Yeah.
But until, the ADs and boosters are very quick to fire coaches at all different levels after 3 years. And it's like, they haven't even got a chance to get 100% of their team rallied around them.
Absolutely.
So I think that's where I made a misstep is, okay, I was blinded by, our culture is great in the spring.
Right.
When you lose 1 or 2 in the fall to start off the year, is it as good as what, right. you thought it was? And how do you bring in 50 people to that new culture and get them brought on board, So So that was the biggest thing, I think, for me.
I appreciate you sharing that, Coach. Now, before I let you go here, you're part of our 2022 35 under 35 class, and that is a special deal for me. You know, that's definitely my baby, and I'm so proud of all the coaches that kind of went through there and doing tremendous things in the game as yourself and others are doing currently. Just real quick, talk briefly on, you know, what that experience was like for you, and you know, just the impact of that AFCA network and, you know, everything you were able to take away from it.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing program, and it was something that had been on my radar for a lot. And really, somebody told me one time, it's not about like who knows you know, or who I know, right? It's who knows me. And being a small college guy, I didn't have this vast connection where my dad coached Division I football, and I didn't have those connections. And we talked about earlier, like, I'm a shy guy that doesn't really like to go out and shake people's hands that I don't know. So what I tried to do was, you know, give resources for free away to the coaching community and build some of those connections. So I think that was huge in my pursuit of the 35 under 35. And with the program you put on, like, it's amazing. And then last year I came and spoke as a head coach, and I'll always be willing to do whatever you need me to do for AFCA, just because it's a passion for me to be able to help young men and young coaches.
Coach, I sure appreciate you, man, as always. If you don't mind, you want to share those Twitter accounts. I know we mentioned them a couple times, but just any way for guys to kind of connect with you, keep up with you, learn from you. So just throw those out there. We'll make sure to tag them in the show notes.
Yeah, Coach Nick Davis, I'm willing to message you. If you shoot me a message and I don't get back to you, shoot me another message. I will. I got 40,000 followers. A lot of recruits right now are hitting me up, but I get back to every person who shoots me a message that I physically see. So get a hold of me, and I'll get back to you, and I'll hopefully be able to help you with anything that you need. All
right, Coach. We'll tag that in the show notes. Hey, thanks again, and look forward to seeing you in Nashville in 2024.
We're looking forward to it.
All right, Coach. Thanks. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset. If you heard anything on this episode that you would like to learn more information about, head over to afcapodcast.com, where you can find every episode and all of the corresponding show notes. While you're there, take a second to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, please let us know by sending an email to podcast@afca.com. Make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter @InsideTheHeadset and tag it when you share each episode. You can stay up to date with all things AFCA by following the @WeAreAFCA Twitter account. Every episode of Inside the Headset can also be found on your favorite audio streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you are not currently a member of the AFCA, be sure to find us online at afca.com and apply to join over 10,000 NFL, college, and high school coaches from around the country who are striving to be the best they can be. With an AFCA membership, you gain invaluable access to the annual AFCA convention, the bi-monthly magazine, and the new and improved digital library, which contains thousands of videos and articles contributed by hundreds of current and former football coaches. You can also visit afcainsider.com to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter on the right-hand side of the screen. It comes out every Tuesday at lunch and is filled with great articles and stories written by many of the same coaches you hear on the podcast. It's geared to help you become a better coach tomorrow than you are today. Be sure to connect with me on Twitter @CoachMarioPrice, and remember, the AFCA is not just an annual convention. It is an association that continually promotes education, guidance, and networking. But it is also so much more than that. The AFCA is about celebrating the past and educating the future. It is about developing great coaches who will produce great teams and even better people. So invest in your skill set and impact today by engaging with the AFCA.